Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Peace Podcast. This topic came to me as I was thinking about, wanting to know the truth, but why do we have so much trouble experiencing the truth? And so you think about, I don't want to be lied to. I want to know all the details. I want to know why this is happening, etc. But sometimes we have a really hard time actually accepting and experiencing the truth. So I really did a deep dive into why that actually exists. And so I landed on three main points. And I love my three main points. So I landed on three main points, and I thought we would definitely get into those. But let's just talk about how we experience lies and how we're tricking ourselves into thinking that we want the truth. And so sometimes we'll be in relationships and we'll know that the person is lying to us or that the details of the situation are different than what someone is revealing to us. And we'll accept those lies even though our intuition tells us that it's not the truth. Or sometimes we'll be in thinking about our family system. Sometimes we'll be in relation with family members and we'll know that they're embellishing, or we'll know that they're switching information to manipulate the situation. And oftentimes it's really hard for us to distinguish. There's that like disassociation, but it's really hard for us to distinguish the lies from the truth. And sometimes even we'll go years and not know that the information that we've believed all along is actually a lie and not the truth, because it's interesting because we want the truth, but we don't really want to experience what would happen if we accepted the truth. So we've told ourselves that the truth is the most important thing, but because we've lived in the lie for so long, subconsciously, we really don't want to experience the truth. We don't want what we've experienced to actually have been a lie, and we don't want to have to rethink our entire history with this person or with this family based on the actual information and have to accept that everything that we've known has not been the truth. And it happens quite often when we actually get to a space where we accept the truth, like when you're ending a relationship and you decide, hey, this person is really all of these things that my intuition was telling me about them, or someone cheats on you and you've known all along that that's what they would do. Um, and you've kind of pushed that idea to the back of your head, but now you know for a fact that it's the truth. And even sometimes this is like when it really is blaring. Sometimes we'll have evidence that it's the truth, and we'll convince ourselves that that evidence isn't real or that it's still a lie. So why do we do this? Like, what are the reasons that we may not want to be able to experience or accept the truth? And that's on a subconscious level. Because if you talk to anyone and you ask them, do you want to know the truth? They'll probably tell you yes. But the reality is, we think we want the truth, but are we willing to actually accept the truth? And the truth is going to give you peace, because the thing that you think is reality doesn't exist without the truth. So it's going to give you peace just for the mere fact that the truth is what exists. So you're allowing what exists to be in your space. But we don't always want that. We think that we do. We think that uh, we have the ability to accept the truth. We think that we really want to know the real deal. But we also really like to exist in the space that we've created, and sometimes the truth disrupts that, and we don't really subconsciously want that information. So why do we do that? Well, when you're thinking about relation with people, there are times where we'll excuse the behaviors of others. So we talked about that cheating example, and maybe abuse. It may be just that person isn't always who they say they are, just things that may seem minute and small, even things that people would say you shouldn't end a relationship for, like some of those things may exist. And you'll excuse those behaviors because you don't want the outcome of what's real. So if I'm excusing this behavior, then I get to stay comfortable in this relationship. If I'm excusing this behavior, then I don't have to admit that my partner is actually abusive and that I'm in an abusive relationship and that I've put myself here by the choices that I've made. If I'm excusing this behavior, then I can pretend to the world that this thing that is postable exists and I don't have to actually deal with the reality. But the reality exists whether you want to accept it or not. So if you're accepting the behaviors for what they are, then you allow yourself to make a choice, right? You're not the victim of these behaviors. You're not, you may be the person who's been cheated on, but you're not stuck in that relationship. You may be the person who's being abused, but you're not stuck in that relationship. And until you identify and accept the truth, then there is no choice because choices are made based on truth. And if you're making a choice based on this alternate reality that you've created in your head that those things don't exist, then there is no choice because you're not making a choice between truth and what's not the truth, what's not the reality. So when you actually accept the behaviors for what they are and you stop sweeping them under the rug or putting a mask over them to pretend they don't exist, then you give yourself a choice. So I'm allowing what exists to exist, and I'm giving myself the choice of whether or not I want to accept it. The second reason that we deny the truth is because you don't like what it says about you. So if the truth is that you've consistently been in abusive relationships, then you have to actually accept that that says something about you. If the truth is that your family system has this huge lie in it that means something different about your life and about you as a person, let's say, give an example, the person who you always thought was your dad is not, right? You're afraid of what that might say about you. You're afraid that it might say that your dad didn't want you, so you weren't good enough, or he abandoned you, right? You're afraid that all of the things that you knew about yourself that were characteristics that you grasped from the person that you thought was your dad no longer really exist in you. So it's like a whole identity crisis. And it doesn't negate that that exists just because you didn't know the truth about it. It has always existed. You're just allowing the truth to give you data that's new information and that may actually change something in you as a person. But it existed before you knew about it and before you're allowing yourself to accept it. So accepting the truth allows you to see your patterns and it allows you to do something about them if you need to. So if we're talking back to that relationship example, and if you don't want to accept that you've always been in abusive relationships because you've always accepted and even sought out abusive men because of something about you that is comfortable in those situations, then you can't change the pattern. If you can blame it on other people, or if you can say, man, I'm unlucky in relationships, or my picker's broken, or whatever it is, then you don't have to accept the truth that there's a pattern that exists in you. And oftentimes we'll say, well, that relationship isn't abusive, just so we don't have to accept the pattern that exists within us. But when you can accept that pattern, then you can actually do something about it. If you accept the fact that, or the reality that that exists, then you can say, okay, this exists, and go introspective and see why. If you're a person who's a perfectionist, I know all about this. If you're a person who's a perfectionist, if you don't recognize the pattern and be honest with yourself that you're a perfectionist, if you don't recognize that perfectionists are super judgmental of other people because it's the same judgment that they give to themselves, then you can't actually do something about it because you won't recognize that to be the truth. So it really is getting honest with yourself and saying, if I'm accepting this truth, which is what we should all do because it exists anyway, it's going to have conditions anyway, whether you accept it or not. But if I accept this truth, then I'm allowing myself to see that pattern and I can actually do something about it. Now, we won't go into this into depth, but if you're a person who likes to be the victim and you victimize yourself about everything, you'll lie to yourself just to remain the victim. And so you really have to get introspective with that too. Like, am I a person who likes to play the victim? And if that's the case, then what lies am I telling myself to remain the victim inside of these circumstances? Because we do that if we want to be the victim. If victimhood gets us more attention and what we're seeking is attention, if victimhood makes us feel like we were good enough because it puts us on this pedestal of perfection while we're breaking down the other person, then we'll continue in that pattern because we don't want to identify that the truth exists, that there is some flaw inside of us. There is something that we did wrong, because then we can't continuously blame the other person. And if we can't continuously blame the other person, then we have to accept the flaw in us, and we don't want to do that. If you're a person who likes victimhood, this is a perfect recipe for you to remain in victimhood. But victimhood doesn't negate that the truth exists. It's still there. It's still affecting you. It's just you're doing way more to mask it and cover it up. And the third thing is you fear the truth because it requires you to actually do something. So if I know the truth, then I have to do something about it. If I know that I'm a perfectionist, then I have to do something about that perfectionism. If I know that I'm not being the best mom that I can be, then I have to do something about it. Or I could lie to myself and say, you're doing your best. And sometimes that's the truth. Sometimes it is your very best. But sometimes that's a lie we tell ourselves so that we can continue to do the bare minimum and say that we're a good parent. Sometimes we tell ourselves that the situations that have existed in our family systems from the past don't really affect us. That doesn't really affect me because it didn't happen to me. The reality is it does affect you, because the truth is that those type of traumas are generational. They're passed down. So what's done to your dad is also something that affects you, even if it wasn't done to you. What's done to your grandfather is also something that affects you, even if it wasn't done to you. What's done to your mom is also something that affects you, even if it wasn't done to you. So if you don't accept the reality and the truth of that situation, you will perpetuate the situation. So you're going to pass that same generational wealth, and I put that in air quotes because it's not wealth, down to your kids. And then your kids will have to either decide to heal from it and accept the truth, or to continue to lie to themselves that it's not anything that's a big deal. So living in a lie is bondage, and we have to accept that it's bondage. And shoving the experience down does not change the reality of the situation. So no matter how many times you say, oh, that's not a big deal, oh, that doesn't exist, and you keep shoving it down as if it's not the reality, you won't do the work because you're pushing it down. In fact, that'll snowball your trauma. Your trauma will get larger, and you'll be avoiding doing the work. And the thing about the work is that the work sets you free. So there's this whole idea that if I fight against something or if I control something, then it doesn't exist. You can fight against it and control it all you want. The reality is it still exists. I fought against and tried to control an abusive relationship for 8 years. That abusive relationship still existed. And it wasn't until I said, I'm going to allow him to do what his natural tendency is to do, and I'm going to take notes and really see the situation for what it is, that I actually accepted that it was an abusive relationship, that I put myself in it, that I could have left, and that it affected me and my children. And all of that maybe wasn't my doing, but it was still my responsibility because I put myself inside of it. And we don't want to take accountability. So sometimes we'll say, well, that's not the truth. Or because I could walk around and say, I'm a victim of this abuse. And I was a victim of the abuse. However, the relationship is something that I made a choice to get inside of. Now, my kids didn't have a choice. So they were the victim of that situation. And also, one of them made a choice to tell me how they felt about it. That telling me how they felt about it was a catalyst for it changing. And I had to allow myself to see the truth. Sometimes we need those external influences to tell us that it's the truth. But oftentimes you recognize it as the truth, but you push that reality to the back of your head, because if you don't accept it as truth, then perhaps you can shove it down enough, post enough really good reels that show your life in a different light, that you'll actually start to believe it. But the thing about the truth is, the truth will always surface. It'll always come back up. You can't shove it down for forever. And once you accept the truth, then you can do the work to set you free. Speaking of being set free, if you have been in a toxic relationship or are trying to heal from a toxic relationship and you would like to work with me, I'm going to put my course in the link. You can go ahead and click on that link. You can register for the course. All the information is there for you to do so. I would love to work with you on emerging in a place of powerful peace after that type of situation. It could be a toxic family system relationship or a actual relationship with a partner. So go ahead and click that link. And if you're not one of those people, but you know someone who is, please share the link with those people. Share the wealth. Let them know that there's somebody out there who can walk them through the journey of healing. I appreciate you so much for tuning in. Um, Remember that you can look me up on all social media sites as Carrie Nicole. You can also go to my website, which is carrienicole.com. And I'm on YouTube and also the podcast, which comes out every Monday, which you can get on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on the website, carrienicole.com. And you can watch the video on YouTube. Thank you guys again for tuning in. I will see you next week.